Hi, and welcome to Athens Speakout. Today is November 1st, 2016. This is program 387 with Dr. Robert Whaley, a foreign relations historian. My name is Steve Antle, and this program is going to be moderated by Lois Whaley, also a historian. Okay, Lois, if you're ready to throw out that first question.
Right. My question has to do with Ted Strickland, the former congressman in our district here, and then governor of Ohio from 2006 to 2010. We heard him speak at the Democratic dinner the other night, and what would you like to say about Mr. Strickland's comments?
Okay. All right. Well, Ted Strickland campaigned for himself in his Senate race and gave a plug to Hillary Clinton's campaign. And what was significant about it was that Strickland admitted that he's probably not going to win. He's 6 points behind. And that's seldom done by a campaign. 6 points behind Robert Portman. But Hillary will win nationally. That was the point of Strickland. He kind of turned it away from himself and spoke for the presidential candidate. And he explained why he was losing. The problem was PAC money, like the Koch brothers, giving Portman $6 million. And then that's intensified by the Democratic National Committee, who then cuts off subsidies to Strickland because they don't think he's viable, and Ohio is no longer a swing state. So Strickland then continued the fight in order to see that Athens County at least would go for Hillary Clinton, continuing the tradition of Athens County of being one of the few liberal counties in the state. And then he goes back to how Strickland got into politics. Strickland was elected for the first time to the House of Representatives in 1992 with 9 counties. And most of them were very conservative, except for Athens County. So it was Athens County that put him over the top, and he beat the incumbent Republican Bob McEwen, who was being gerrymandered out of his district because Bob McEwen had to run against Clarence Miller, and a lot of Republicans just stayed home because they were Miller fans and they were McEwen fans. So Strickland won with a kind of a peculiar gerrymandering problem. Well, then from the House, Strickland was elected governor, and one of his campaign assistants was John Hazley, who's still active in politics. And Strickland, when he was governor, had Hazley as an assistant. And then Strickland made the comment, if he had 87 other people like John Hazley as county chairman, Hazley and the other would-be Hazleys would take the state of Ohio, and the state of Ohio would be solid Democratic state because they would see that it's largely a working-class state. So Strickland has kind of moved to the left and talking about class problems, which he kind of shuffled over when he was governor before. Okay, he's getting moving to the left. So anyway, from the House, Strickland then was elected governor, and his campaign, I just mentioned that, he was Hazley. And then getting back to Portman. Portman was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And he went to Harvard. And Strickland was born in Appalachia on a dirt road, had 9 siblings, and his father was a steel worker. So Strickland now supports move to amend, a constitutional amendment which would amend the United States Constitution with the 28th Amendment, defining corporate personhood as different from real, live, living men and women. And the Bill of Rights should be protected as they were originally written. Okay, so I think that's about all I will have to say about Strickland. and we could move on to another subject unless
I just
Steve
wanted to
wants to
comment.
get into
I
the-
believe Ted Strickland was a Lucasville psychologist, I
Yes.
believe, who started
Right.
there in Lucasville.
Yes,
then-
also a Methodist minister, and he has a PhD in psychology,
Yes.
which is the basis for him having been a counselor at the federal prison in
Yes.
Lucasville, which is basically his home area.
So then the next question is, back to the title, do Hillary and Trump have different proposals for dealing with crime? And getting to Trump, Trump talks big about law and order. And street crime in Chicago and Las Vegas and Phoenix and New York and Philadelphia are led by poor inner city blacks. But the causes of crime are very complex, and the amount of thefts and gun violence in the inner city are relatively small compared to the costs of white-collar crime on the part of Wall Street and the multinational corporations. The problem with the subject of crime is that fraud and embezzlement, white-collar crime, is almost impossible to enforce. How do the protectors, whistleblowers, get bank officials to turn in potential evidence of corporate wrongdoing when the bank employees will be automatically fired or forced by the whistleblowers to risk losing their jobs? So Hillary's great hope is to appeal to Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who would like to be the new Securities and Exchange Commission director. And potentially, if Elizabeth Warren wins, she would like to protect the big bank presidents from a small fine and put them in jail rather than limiting their token fines. Now, they are being charged fines that look enormous in the eyes of the lower middle class, but from the point of view of the lower middle class, those who are voting for Trump have very little idea the difference between millions of dollars and billions of dollars. So that's the problem of the two kinds of crime that the two candidates are talking about.
I'd like to say a little bit about the white-collar crime. If you're working for Chase Bank, and I'm just, or
good.
better example would be Goldman Sachs,
Right.
where Mrs. Clinton's son-in-law works. If you get caught there committing a white-collar crime and you get fined $5 million, Goldman Sachs picks up that $5 million fine. So it's not much of a deterrent.
That's right. I'm glad you and I see eye to eye.
Right.
So the next problem here is, how does the United States stop the growing national debt? So the debate over gun control laws are relatively minor issues in stopping the big criminals. So Hillary Clinton missed an opportunity in preaching about the revival of the work ethic and the Methodist religion. And she has inherited, as a kid, a Methodist religion when she entered Wellesley College in September of 1965. But Hollywood has sold increased consumption of drugs, alcohol, free sexual behaviors, and are ruling the misinformed generations. And there have been 4 generations who are misinformed. The first one, from 1960 to 1980, and the second one from 1980 to 2000. So there have been increasingly misinformed generations about the problems of street crime and how petty crime leads to bigger crimes.
Let's break that down as far as guns and everything are concerned. Let's
ahead.
go back to, I don't know that either one of these candidates are going to do anything anytime too soon until the issue of the first real scandal in the Obama administration was called Fast and Furious.
All right. Tell us
which
about
occurred down on the Mexican border.
Right.
And we were evidently going to supply guns, or we did supply guns to drug dealers and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Well, that got all way out of hand, and I know that's still ongoing, and I don't really know enough about it other than the topic and listening to other people talk about it. That was never resolved.
Well, it was never resolved because the border between Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona and California
That's right.
are wide open.
It's porous.
The guns go into Mexico and the drugs come into the United States.
Right.
That's part of a decadent society.
But when you have the Attorney General of the United States involved in that sort of thing, I don't know what, I don't know who else was involved in that. If the FBI was involved in that, probably the immigration and naturalization people were involved in that.
Well, it's illegal.
They're told what to do. They are told what to do. It's not. And then another thing about guns. Most of these gun crimes are committed in what they call gun-free zones. And
You've been to Mexico.
Yes. But I'm talking right now. I'm talking about Chicago.
Okay, Chicago.
And those gun-free zones and areas that police don't even want to venture into, but they do. They do venture into those areas, but they're outgunned by the outlaws. You know.
Right. Okay.
So I don't. And Rahm Emanuel, who used to be Mr. Obama's right-hand man, mayor of Chicago now, he's in denial or something that there's a problem going on up there. I have been all over Chicago, inside and out, and there are places that this fat boy won't go,
right.
because getting out of there but it's mostly black on black.
That's right.
And it's, and it's mostly, and there are some Latinos involved, but mostly black on black, and it goes underreported.
Sure it does.
And
right.
So you had mentioned that about guns, and that's the reason I brought that up.
Well, good.
So
getting back now to the 11th of October, 2016, the debate in St. Louis at Washington College. A great deal of time was wasted in talking about sex and street crime. And the $64 question today, which is an antique, that was very popular back in 1948 before inflation. We should now have $1 million question. That question, that question should be, how does the United States stop the growing national debt? The debate over gun control laws are really relatively a minor issue in stopping crime. Okay, as you say, it's wild in Chicago. New York does a better job.
Yeah.
And Phoenix is almost as bad as Chicago. And there's a great deal of variation between the cities and the states on enforcing street crime. Anyway, so a simple national gun control law is still out of reach.
Right.
It's only tokenism.
Right.
And I think that Hillary misses a great opportunity, and she should be talking about the revival of the work ethic and the Methodist religion, which she inherited as a kid and seems to have been forgotten since she left Wellesley College.
Yeah, Robert, I wanted to mention something. We were talking about guns. It's most people don't realize your chances of being killed by a knife or brute force are a great deal greater than being killed by a gun.
I don't think there are any statistics on that.
Matter of fact, I just read some statistics on it. I don't happen to have them at my disposal, but most murders are not committed by guns. They're brute force, you know.
Or what about poison? This is the
I don't
of the
know
woman.
about that.
The woman poisons the husband.
Well, you
There have
know,
been thousands of cases
I'm
on
sure
that.
there are statistics on that, but you don't hear too many people being poisoned. But other than if you want to consider illegal drugs poison, that's a very good way to
Okay, then there is, you know, taking a baseball bat, and
that sort of thing.
yeah, okay.
But
So there are several forms of murder, but the important decision about guns is their speed.
oh yeah, that's true.
And they say, the blacks and the women say, why didn't you use a taser weapon and prevent some of these shootings?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that because you know, when we think about Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, Maryland, and
Right.
New York, and different
Right.
cities, it's had problems. I recently read this article where Baltimore was kind of taking things back. The police department and the judicial department were taking things back into their own hands, in the sense that they are now enforcing laws and regulations and all that are on the books. You know, when you do a certain crime, you know, we're going to enforce the law. There's a lot of laws on the books. You know, when you hear some politicians say, well, we need to make a law to stop this, it's already there.
That's right.
It's already there. All they need to do is,
right.
but they're not enforced.
That's correct.
So now they are enforcing laws that they had let go by.
All right, Lois wants to say something.
Okay.
Yes, I was going to say that I'm sure that I heard Hillary Clinton in one of her speeches say that there were about 33,000 gun deaths every year. However, it's pointed out that those statistics include both murders and suicides.
Yeah.
And the suicides are actually larger than in number. They're like 60%.
Wow.
Something like that, which is something we don't think about.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. And on the way over here, Robert and I were talking about suicides and the number of suicides that have increased. And
It's an example of a
and
decadent
why,
society.
and the fact, well, I go back to drugs.
Right.
And I also go back to people with lack of jobs and
Sexual incompatibility.
dysfunctional
Loss
families.
of wives, loss of husbands.
Right.
Old
There's a
age.
lot involved, but no, Lois, that's an interesting thing. I'd never heard that suicides outnumbered homicides, but
That's what I
yeah,
heard.
okay, yeah.
Now,
Sure,
I
sure.
would like another explanation of street crime. Criminal law enforcement since 1964 is related to the Vietnam War. There have been relatively inefficient enforcement of crime in stopping the campus, the inner city, the returning war veteran, and the entire nation is being ruined by a drug epidemic. And according to Burnham, marijuana opens the door to alcohol, which opens the door to cocaine, which opens the door to heroin, and now we have OxyContin. And the drug epidemic is being addressed by both Hillary and Trump in theory, but how do you enforce it? That's the problem here. So, organized religion, Catholics.
Wait a minute. I'd like to
Okay.
speak on this
Good.
drug problem. David DeWitt and I had discussed. I think we did 2 programs on opioids. I don't know if you saw it or not.
We did.
But that is one thing that Robert Portman is big on, trying to stop this opioid
Right.
production. And I might even mention Athens County is doing a good job. They just recently put a guy away for 16 years who was a major drug dealer in this area. And but a lot of these drugs originate in doctors' offices, and they're relatively easy to get if you tell them that you're suffering from pain and everything like that. They started out with these, prescription drugs.
Right.
Well, there's a point in time that after unfortunately, a lot of these people got addicted. There was a point in time where they could no longer get a prescription for the drugs. So then they turned to heroin, and Athens County has had a really bad heroin problem. I know when we had the sheriff on here a few years back, he was telling the number of heroin deaths in Athens County were some of the highest in the nation.
So we have a lot of corrupt doctors.
Well, I don't know if that's
drugs,
their
who overprescribe drugs.
You might say that.
It's the
to
easy
some
way out.
extent. Yeah.
Yeah. You only have to visit
And
a patient for 10
and
minutes.
who do you think these doctors are being influenced by? It's the drug companies. It's your pharmaceutical companies that push drugs all the time. There's a drug for everything.
You have your
And
Lois wants to get in here.
okay.
Bob, you mentioned Burnham,
Right.
but you didn't identify him, and I think
All right,
that
let's
this
get into
time
Burnham.
you
Let's
should
get into Burnham.
identify
Yeah.
who John
Well, I can
Burnham
identify him real quick if
is,
you'd like
or-
to.
okay.
John Burnham is a social historian from Ohio State University, and in 1993 he wrote a book called Bad Habits. And both Robert and Lois Whaley are personal friends of Dr. Burnham. And Robert and I did about 6 installments, I think, on the book called Bad Habits.
Right. And we wanted Dave DeWitt to read this book. That's
Well,
what-
I'm sure David did.
That's how we got into it. Anyway, the 6 bad habits were in 1948 really 6 venial sins. But you can't use the word sin in this secular society we have. That's not scientific. That's an obsolete word among some churches and some people. Anyway, they are, number 1, drinking, which John Burnham thinks is the worst of the problems.
I think of every law enforcement official that I've talked with, and also some psychologists that I've talked with, say that drinking still is number 1
And
as
then
far as
2,
we're concerned.
smoking, 3, drug taking, 4, sexual misbehavior, 5, gambling, and 6, swearing. Okay, so let's look at number 1, drinking.
Okay.
Do you agree with Burnham's history on the rise and fall of the Prohibition experiment? He has 2 chapters on this. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I agree with Burnham as far as what was concerned. I don't necessarily agree with our government and how they handled it. If you want to take the government side and say prohibition doesn't work, and
Well, we have to talk about, quote,
but
the
at the
government.
same time, it did work to some extent, because
That's
there
right.
are a lot of people who, if it's in violation of the law, they won't consume alcohol.
Okay, so the Prohibition movement started at the state level.
Right.
And Maine was the first state to have a Prohibition law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in 1840,
Yeah.
Portland, Maine abolished all alcohol in the city.
Were they called temperance laws, or?
No, they were called Prohibition of Alcohol in the city of Portland.
Okay.
And, of course, people smuggled it in. Okay, so the speakeasies began in Portland.
Right.
But they couldn't enforce it in the country at all, okay? Well, then other states picked it up. Ohio, Kansas became some of the early Prohibition states.
Well, you had some pretty influential politicians in the state of Maine at that time, I believe, didn't you? I mean,
Well,
as far as the
Maine
rest-
was a very Puritan, Calvinistic state.
Right.
okay? And it comes from John Calvin. John Calvin prohibited the drinking of alcohol, okay, in his own congregation.
Yeah.
And the drinking went way down in the Calvinistic sects, okay? So then they said, well, we can spread this, and it spread among women. You remember
Yes.
Carrie Nation? Who was Carrie Nation, Lois?
Well, Carrie Nation was a real activist in terms of attacking saloons. I mean, she would go into saloons with an axe and, hit the bar and all that sort of thing. But I did want to mention that a famous person, a famous woman from Southeast Ohio, had 3 causes. One of them was temperance. The other 2 were abolition of slavery and women's rights. And that was Frances Dana Gage, who was born in Washington County,
Marietta area, I believe.
Right.
Marietta area.
Right,
Yes.
But the argument among the women is that the wages were only $6 a week. And the beer drinker from Germany and whiskey drinker from Ireland used to drink up 3/4 of the weekly pay, and
Right.
he left a couple of dollars for the food. So they were saying you got to have prohibition in order to protect the women. That was the
Right.
Protection of Women Act.
Right.
And the families.
And the family,
Sure.
right? So that's how Burnham gets into this, because Burnham was raised in California. He doesn't say anything about his religion, but his wife is still a Methodist, and he still raised his, 5 kids? How many kids does Burnham have?
Oh, 4.
4.
4 adopted children.
Yeah, adopted children, and they were all given a kind of an underground Puritan temperance lecture as kids. That's the connection between science and prohibition and religion, okay? So anyway, so Burnham says that prohibition did not fail. That's the big slogan. We had the 18th Amendment, which tried to make national prohibition. And that was a mistake, because the states, there was something like 3/4 of the states had already ratified it. Now, in 1917, Woodrow Wilson was president, and Woodrow Wilson came from Virginia, and he was personally a prohibitionist. But the war effort became important for getting the 3/4 of states to ratify the 18th Amendment, because they used to use alcohol in the gunpowder business. So Pierre DuPont, who made most of the alcohol, said, okay, I'm for prohibition. And they got 3 or 4 more states to ratify it. It was ratified, and the 18th Amendment passed.
Right.
Okay, so this is where advertisement gets into the alcohol business. Because as soon as the war is over in the 1920s, Pierre DuPont is the first one for repealing the 18th Amendment.
Right.
Because now we can have a civilian life, and we have a big fight in the 20s between the wets and the dries. The wets said we have to keep drinking legal, and the dries wanted to keep prohibition. Well, that went around until 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt was elected, and he got a lot of votes from the Irish and the Germans and the poor working class in the big cities. And his argument was, if we repeal prohibition, that'll give more jobs for the beer companies. And sure enough, the beer companies opened.
Well,
So it was
they still
repealed.
have prohibition in some states, don't they? And some
Yeah, there was
counties
local.
and local control.
Oh, there's dry counties. There's
There-
dry counties right here in Ohio.
I think they are talking right now here in the city of Athens about changing some precincts so that the precincts can have sale of beer, for instance, and wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it continues. And I might mention that we're near the halfway point.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll stop here and identify
Right.
ourselves.
Okay.
We are talking about the relationship between crime and venial sins or bad habits. And drinking is regarded as one of the gateway addiction problems which lead to drugs and other problems, sexual misbehavior. So anyway, according to Burnham, prohibition did not fail. Yeah, the prohibition was never intended to get rid of all alcohol. They just wanted to eliminate, they wanted to limit the quantities.
Right.
So it was a partial success in that the addiction rate went down between 1917 and 1933. And then since the recovery of the alcohol business, the addiction rate has gone up.
Well, another thing I think the government got involved in was because we had all these outlaws in Chicago and all these places, you know, running alcohol. And
that's right. That's a question of enforcement again.
Yeah. But you remember, that's how they made their money, you know.
Yeah. Chicago was open to the lakes. The lakes
Right.
are open to Canada.
Right.
Detroit was open to Canada.
So,
I used to live in a prohibition area. I mean, a speakeasy area.
Yeah.
I lived in Long Island.
Right.
And I used to go to Sunday school with a very puritanical Sunday school teacher by the name of Clyde Herbert. Okay. He was a fisherman.
Okay.
So when I was 18, he took the Sunday school class out into the ocean, 6 miles, and we did a little fishing.
Yeah.
And we came back, and my father said, "Who's your Sunday school teacher?" He didn't go to church, but he knew he wanted me to go to a strict Methodist church,
Right.
because it would keep me out of crime. Well, anyway,
Right.
he says, "I know Clyde Herbert." He said, "You know, he was in the prohibition business."
Is that right?
He said he had a launch. It would go out
Yeah.
6 miles.
Yeah.
The boats from Canada would come in from France. They would throw whiskey in there, and they'd put that in the bottom of the boat and put the fish on top. And then he would deliver that to the Long Island Railway, and they'd take that to New York and even the speaking.
Well, maybe that was a pretty good cover.
That's what you
being a
call
Sunday school teacher.
hypocrisy.
Yeah, they might not have ever guessed he was doing that. Either that, or when I look at some of these people, they get involved in crime, like if they get involved in the transport of drugs or whatever else, they don't have a lot of choice in it. You know, what I'm saying is, you're either going to, and maybe at that time that was the case, either you're going to help us out here, or we can make things tough for you.
No, it's done for profits.
But you think he was purely
Well, let's
profit.
say he made $30 catching fish.
Yeah.
If you smuggle whiskey, you would make another $100.
Maybe
As long as you didn't get caught.
Maybe he was going to had eyes on buying.
And they weren't just doing it in Baldwin, all along the East Coast there.
wanted to buy a bigger boat. Perhaps.
In other words, you had Valley Stream, Lynbrook, Baldwin, Freeport, Massapequa, Baldwin, Freeport, Belmore, Wantor, Seaford, Massapequa, Amity. Every one of those towns were in the fishing business.
Something fishy about that business.
And my father and my grandfather knew a guy who went in the storage business.
Yeah,
They were called the Verity Brothers.
I see.
And they built a big brick building.
Yeah.
And they built trucks that transported furniture all over the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. Who do you think paid for that building?
I have no idea.
The Verity Brothers were saving their money from prohibition and put it into this storage business.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
But how can you enforce that?
I guess not.
It's fine if you don't get caught. Well, anyway.
Maybe they didn't want to enforce
Anyway,
it.
that's the problem. So the real question is, how is it that AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, succeeds in some cases but fails in others?
I might mention that according to what I've read and people have told me, that is the most successful program in history as far as that. I think some guy from like Canton, Ohio or something, Bill Wilson or somebody from Canton, Ohio.
It started in 1935.
Yeah, and that's been the most successful treatment program that they've had to date.
And my son was a successful, my wife doesn't want me to talk about my son. But we'll say I had a close relative who got some alcohol problems.
Yeah,
And he solved it and cured himself
good.
by becoming sober again. but religion helped him become sober again.
Yeah.
Lois, you have anything further to add or subtract?
No.
Okay, she doesn't want to say anything about that.
Okay.
Okay, so the alcoholic cures himself by admitting,
Yeah.
I am
Well,
an
that's the first
alcoholic
step,
and I
think,
can't touch it again.
Yeah.
As soon as you say that,
Yeah.
you're on your way to recovery.
Yeah.
But the alcoholic will continue to be an alcoholic if he's on a state of denial.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not drunk. We had a faculty man. Oh, no, I have no problem. He was leaning up against the wall, and he saw the wall going. He says, "Gee, I do have a problem." So he decided to go to AA late in life when he was 65 years old. Well, it saved him a little bit extra
Right.
years, but
Exactly.
alcoholism was the real reason for his death.
I always tell people.
I won't mention his name either.
Okay. I always tell people I don't drink as much as I should.
Okay, so anyway, John Burnham's thesis is, and his thesis of the bad habits, is that one problem leads to another. So some people begin with alcohol, and some begin with smoking, and then eventually that might lead to shoplifting and petty theft from 18 to 25. And then petty theft gets you involved into the mafia and the wider world. So little crimes can be the origin of bigger crimes. I think that's high school can lead to.
You know, I got to. This is an ad that's on the radio in the West Virginia area that I listen to, and I think it's pretty good. It pretty well sums that up. The guy says, "Look out the window where my car used to be."
All right.
He said, "Yeah, my car." He says, "That's the one I had to sell to pay the lawyer when I get picked up for DUI."
Right.
And by the way, do you see my girlfriend sitting around there anywhere? No. She's gone because she does a guy without a car and no money. And, you know, I also lost my job because I went to court all the time to fight this DUI case. And a lot of people don't realize now, I've seen the statistics on this, that the average DUI can cost you $10,000 between loss of work and fines and paying a lawyer and all that sort of stuff. So if anybody's out there drinking
You've
and
always
driving,
been sober, but you had a brother who had problems.
Yeah, I had a brother that had some alcohol problems.
Alcoholism is known in all families, so why deny it?
But anyway, so what do you want to go with there next?
All right,
I got off on a tangent there, but I think that's a great ad where that guy just, you know.
Okay, well, Burnham's point is that advertising is part of the problem of spreading alcohol since 1933 right up to the present time.
Yeah.
It's big money in it. Okay.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes back to your Madison Avenue people there, and who was it, Bernays?
Yeah.
You know, and the advertising, and like when he advertised cigarettes, and I don't know if you're going to talk about cigarettes or not, but...
Well, we can move in. If we've exhausted, we can go into smoking if you want.
Okay, if you want to do that, that's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Bernays was a Madison Avenue advertising executive who was given the job of promoting cigarettes. And Robert knows the brand names more than I do. I know there's
Camels, Chesterfields,
but
Old Goals.
there's Philip Morris, and there's R.J. Reynolds, and there's the American Tobacco Company. But anyway, they even had doctors advertising cigarettes.
Yeah,
you know, like
sure.
which cigarette was it that most doctors preferred?
More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
There you go.
That was a Camel's ad.
So anyway, so advertising, you want to be aware of advertising, you know.
And then the other thing was, I'll walk a mile.
For a camel?
For a camel.
Okay.
Now, the word camel came into this because the original smokers were Turks.
Okay,
The
Turkish
Turks
tobacco.
Introduced tobacco to the British and the Americans. Now,
You know what?
Now, when I say tobacco, I mean cigarettes, mass smoking.
Sure.
Because the American Indians started it, but they used to smoke a pipe piece
Yeah.
every
Right.
time they went to war, which was
Yeah.
maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
They didn't smoke it on a daily basis.
Right.
They were not addicted.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
just
that
thought,
represented
They
something.
just thought it was a religious thing. Okay.
ritual.
Yeah. So that the
But you know what? I think, if I remember right, the Camel cigarette pack, the last one I saw, and it's been a while, but I think it says fine Turkish tobacco on
That's
there.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, the tobacco that we have in the United States is blended, partly American and partly Turkish.
Yeah.
And it's the blend which makes sales throughout the world.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know which one is better than the other, but one moderates the other or something.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, let's get back to smoking then.
Okay. You wanna tell the audience about your smoking history? What about
Well, Lois is afraid of
No,
I'm not
no,
afraid.
it's
I'm
about
not
him.
afraid.
It's about
I'm not
him.
afraid. I began smoking in the 5th grade, and I quit in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was macho.
Yeah.
It made me look like Clark
Yeah.
Gable. Okay.
Yeah.
It was sexy.
Right.
Marilyn Monroe did it.
Right.
Betty Grable did it.
Okay.
All the beautiful women were smoking. That's Hollywood. That's
Yeah.
advertising.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's Bernays right
Bernays,
there.
yeah.
And I was taken in as a
Yeah.
sucker, right?
Right.
Now, in the 8th grade, I kind of changed my tune,
Yeah.
and I gave it up.
Now, how did you acquire cigarettes, by the way?
Oh, these were easy.
Your dad was a smoker, right?
Yeah, but we didn't take it from my dad.
Okay.
What happened was the first guy who introduced cigarettes to me was a kid who lived across the street. His name was Eddie Long.
Yeah.
And his mother and father both smoked. Now, I had a kind of a contradiction. My mother wouldn't smoke, and my father smoked all the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't know whether it was good or bad.
Right.
My father said, yeah, I do it, it's bad. My father said, don't do like I do.
Yeah.
So my father was against it in theory, but he was still smoking.
Now, this was in the 1940s.
Yeah, well, I was born in 1930.
30, yeah.
And we come to, let's say, 1938, we'll say.
Okay.
I was about 8. I began in the 5th grade. How old are you in 5th grade? 12, 13?
10 years old.
10
yeah.
years old, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there was a telephone truck, came right before our house. And the guy goes up and fixes the poles, and he leaves a pack of cigarettes on the seat.
Yeah.
So this guy, Eddie Long, swipes the pack of cigarette and brings it back to me. We were playing Tootsie Toys with Garage.
I see.
And he says, oh, look, I have a pack of ciggies. Oh, boy. Let's smoke them. Smoked a half a pack, one after another. But we didn't inhale. We didn't know what inhaling was. We were just blowing it. We were big shots, okay? Well, that's how
That's how it got started.
That's right. But I didn't know what inhaling was, see?
Yeah.
So, and he didn't either, I guess.
Yeah.
So we would just,
You just kind of filled the room with smoke.
yeah, it was a little bit stupid. Well, anyway. Now, in the 8th grade, I gave it up because this guy, Eddie Long, moved away.
Oh, okay.
I
He was a
didn't-
bad influence. on
Yeah, I
you,
didn't have to impress anybody.
Not only was he a smoker, he was a thief.
Right.
You know.
What about the teacher?
Well, who?
The teacher.
The teacher?
The teacher who showed you what the smoke
Oh,
was
that's
like.
in the 8th grade. That's in the 8th grade. I took a health class.
Yeah.
Well, Lois remembers more about this than I do. Now, in those days, they used to leave kids back, okay?
Yeah.
So in the 8th grade, we all learned about sex and alcohol and smoking.
Yeah.
They said it's all unhealthy. And we learned about vitamins and
Right.
sleep and how you brush your teeth.
Yeah.
A general health course. Sex was the thing that everybody was interested in.
Yeah.
And it was segregated. They used to
Yeah.
have males and
Yeah.
females. And it was taught by the gym coach.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had one kid by the name of George Weed. And he was supposedly a senior, but he was still in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Because he got left back.
Yeah.
And he smoked Camels, and he had huge nicotine stains
Yeah.
all over his fingers.
Right.
So this health teacher says, hey, George, come up here. Let's see you take out one of your cigarettes and smoke it. But he says, you follow my rules. And he takes out a handkerchief. He says, okay, George, you inhale that through the handkerchief. Then he shows the handkerchief to the class.
Yeah.
bingo. It may,
Yeah.
I guess it does affect your lungs.
Yeah.
So that teacher kind of woke me up.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay,
thing.
Lois, you want to add anything else?
Well, I want to give my explanation for why I don't smoke.
Okay.
First of all, my mother didn't smoke, but I had an aunt who did. And one time she said to me, I think I was about your age, like 8 or 9, she said, "You want to try a cigarette?" So I did. And I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, how is it that people can smoke? They have to overcome this terrible, terrible feeling.
Your instinct is to cough.
And you cough and all this sort of thing. I said, that's it. And that was my first and last puff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell my part in smoking. I don't know how old I was. I suppose I was in school, but my mother owned a grocery store, and she sold cigarettes and cigars. So there was a couple other kids in the neighborhood, and we thought we were just going to skip that whole cigarette deal and, go on to something a little better, So being British, I suppose he was British, King Edward.
Cigars?
King Edward cigars. So we started out. I took them from the store and like 3 King Edward cigars, and we went somewhere out behind a barn or something somewhere and fired them.
You again?
Fired them up. Probably 7, maybe.
Yeah.
So it could have been 7. We lit them up, and that was it. We didn't feel well after just a couple hits, So anyway, that's my story, and yeah, that was kind of a good thing, I think. And same way with Lois there. She couldn't understand why anybody smoked them cigarettes, and I certainly couldn't understand why my mother was able to sell cigars. Who would buy them? But somebody did.
Yeah, well, anyway, to get the statistics, in 1948, probably 50 to 60% of the adults over 25 years old.
Well, that was the year you were 18 and graduated from high school.
That's key. That's key. In 1948, probably about 50 to 60%, we can get more exact statistics, of the adults over 25 years old were habitual smokers. Now, if we look at today, we've made some progress. The number of smokers has been reduced to about 25%.
Yeah.
This progress was made by the coordinated efforts of the health educational courses. Second, the restriction of smoking images on television and film can help. And third, the federal, state, and local governments play an influential, informal educational role. No one should be put in jail for smoking, but they play an important part on the no smoking signs. You can enforce rules in a bus, in an airline, in a library building, because the secondhand smoke are minor misdemeanor, but those rules, and breaking those rules, weaken the overall good habits of your smoking neighbors.
Yeah.
So the coordinated effort of loose laws, schools, mass media, have gradually reduced the smoking rates in the United States since 1948.
Robert, I wanted to mention the fact that it's also, it's kind of inconvenient now to be a smoker because there's so many places you can't smoke. Remember, it used to be you able to, and probably there might be some young people watching this program. You used to be able to smoke on airplanes, And
in the buses.
Yes.
On the trains.
Yes, and in restaurants. You could take a cigarette about anywhere you wanted to take it.
And there were ashtrays.
Yes, that's right.
Now they've gotten rid of the ashtrays.
Well, you can't. The new cars or newer cars don't even have lighters. Or I don't even know if you could order a lighter or an ashtray in a car now. I doubt it. But they used to all come equipped
with a lighter.
With a lighter and ashtrays. But anyway, it's just become inconvenient. And the last place that I actually saw people smoking, and in a restaurant, believe it or not, a friend and I were traveling south. I think we're in Virginia to a NASCAR race, and we went into one of these Cracker Barrel restaurants. It's a chain, and when we walked up to be seated, the woman asked, smoking or non-smoking? Well, I hadn't heard that in years. But then I remembered Virginia is a big tobacco state,
That's
and
right.
I think Kentucky,
Right.
and perhaps even Tennessee, parts of it anyway.
Yeah. I have some.
That
I
they
was
still
gonna-
may smoke,
right,
you know, like
right.
that.
So getting to the
But didn't you always think, Lois, that it was really crazy to go into a restaurant and you got a smoking section and a non-smoking section, and there was no divider. There was nothing preventing that air from going from one place to the other.
Yeah. When I first
Secondhand
came-
smoke.
When I
That's
first
right.
came to Ohio University, they used to have smoking in every room, and professors were
Yeah.
smoking.
Yeah.
And we had the famous Edward R. Murrow. He used to said smoking is bad for you, and he was a chain smoker.
Yeah.
And he died of lung cancer.
Right.
And Humphrey Bogart died of lung cancer.
And lung cancer has been even worse than breast cancer among women.
Yeah.
Because women started smoking a lot
Yeah.
in the 50s and
It
so
was
on.
stylish at one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Trendy. You know, another one I wanted to mention, you mentioned Edward R. Murrow. Or
Edward R. Murrow, yeah.
Yeah. Mark Twain, he was given a performance, and he
He used to
said,
smoke cigars.
he said that, he says, you know, all this talk about quitting smoking, I don't understand it. He says, you know, people are always talking about quitting smoking. He says, it's real easy. I've done it 100 times. You know.
Yeah, that's a famous Mark Twain joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, looking at these statistics on the state level, smoking rate varies a lot between the states. Utah, Vermont, and Massachusetts have a very low smoking rates. On the other hand, the worst states are West Virginia, Kentucky, have very high rates for economic reasons. As you say, Virginia, they make it. I didn't put Virginia in there, but West Virginia and Kentucky seem to be worse than Virginia.
Yeah.
Because there are more educated people in Virginia. If you go up to Washington area, there are a lot of middle-class types who
Yeah.
learn their health and so forth. And so,
Right.
West Virginia has still got a lot of hillbillies who don't get much education.
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, my grandfather smoked, and my daddy smoked, and my mommy smoked.
And they're still alive.
Yeah, right, yeah. I always hear this story. My granddaddy smoked till he was 98, you know, and he got run over by a car.
Yeah, that's
So-
anecdotal evidence,
That's right,
not statistics.
right.
Anyway.
But, yeah, but, you know,
5 minutes.
okay,
Well, I think we can finish up smoking very easily here. The Democrats are against smoking, and it depends on a combination of tax laws, educational health laws, and restriction of advertisement. I don't think that Donald Trump has even mentioned the subject, because I think many of his white middle class people who've lost jobs are kind of heavy in smoking.
yeah, well, smoking's not only is it harmful to your health, but it's kind of a expensive habit, you know, especially if you talk to somebody that smokes 3 packs a day. That could be like $18, you know,
Right.
or more, you know, it could be $20. But the thing is, I just wanted to mention on the other hand about, I heard this on the radio one time, and they were talking about smoking and putting the big tax on it and everything like that. Now, the government is the biggest benefactor to the amount of money on cigarettes. Philip Morris might get 25 or 30 cents for a pack of cigarettes, but the government taxes that are on that exceed $2, I think, $2 or $3. So
Well, that's gone up since 1948.
Yes,
In 1948, you could get Camels for 17 cents a pack.
17 cents.
And then they had a cheap cigarette called Wings,
Yeah,
made in Louisville.
Yeah.
You could get those for 11 cents.
yeah, okay.
They were made of stronger tobacco, I guess.
Yeah, probably floor sweepings or something. But you know, I heard this, and it made a lot of sense whether you want to agree with it or not. He said, you know, if Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds and whatever other tobacco companies there are out there would go to Congress on December 30th or 31st and say, as of January 1st, we will no longer be in the cigarette business. You know, this was a congressman that said this. He said Congress would be on their knees pleading for them to continue to manufacture cigarettes because of the tax revenue involved.
And also the export. They sell most of them to China.
Oh yes, that's what I wanted to say about Ohio University. I don't see so many students smoking, but the ones I do tend to be
Chinese.
international students.
Yeah.
And they've acquired that habit. And matter of fact, I was on YouTube or something, I was looking at some sports car or whatever, and it showed they were demonstrating this car in Japan, and the driver's smoking a cigarette and the passenger's smoking a cigarette. So
Yeah.
they're promoting cigarettes at the same
Okay,
time.
well, one final word on this is that the smoking habit is an example of moral progress. Moral progress can be made, but it's on a very slow track. Moral progress is like walking at a rate of 3 miles per hour compared to technological progress,
Yeah.
which is a 350-mile racetrack on Indianapolis Speedway. So that's the problem of John Burnham and bad habits, and I think I'll have to end on this point. Do you want to have a minute?
I just wanted to say we talked about John Burnham and his book Bad Habits and those things. I don't think that either one of the candidates, Donald J. Trump or Hillary Diane Clinton, I don't think that's our issues that they're going to be too concerned with. You know, I think they'll leave that up to the states. You know, it's probably not a presidential issue, so to speak. You know, now earlier we did talk about crime, and that's everybody's concerned, not only on the city or state level or county level or the U.S. level.
That's right.
And I'm sure whoever is elected will. That's one of the first things that they're going to deal with is the crime issue.
Well, we have to keep this debate going, and debate is the oxygen of democracy. Thank you for pinch hitting for Dave DeWitt.
Okay.